Do we have any randomized control trials?
Yeah, we've published a number of, half a dozen or more randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials on our nutritional and dietary supplement products. I've got a drug company now called Bryan Therapeutics where we're taking drugs through FDA clinical trials. We had a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for COVID-19. It was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center study. We've got a drug going into phase 3 clinical trials for ischemic heart disease. Again, a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study. We've got an Alzheimer's drug going into clinical trials, which I think will lead, well, I don't think, I know, will lead to the first and only safe and effective drug for Alzheimer's, because it gets to the root cause of Alzheimer's. It corrects the metabolic dysfunction of Alzheimer's. It improves cerebral blood flow, corrects the focal ischemia in Alzheimer's, and the disease completely goes away. And then we've got a topical drug for diabetic non-healing wounds. Again, so all of these are going through FDA. We filed our investigative new drug applications. We have full regulatory guidance. Now we just got to get these drugs in clinical trials and let them perform.
You mentioned Alzheimer's disease. No, hallmark for this disease is amyloid plaques and tangles and tau particles. So have you seen a reduction in that? Do you reverse it? Or is there no way for you to actually see what changes have occurred? And how many patients were in this trial?
Well, we've seen this anecdotally, and that's what led us to invest the capital and the resources into developing an actual drug therapy. So the hallmarks of Alzheimer's, late-stage Alzheimer's, are the beta amyloid plaque and the tau tangles. And as you know, all drugs that are designed toward Alzheimer's have targeted the beta amyloid plaque and the tau tangles. And in fact, all of those drugs have failed, because what we're finding now is that those are consequences of the disease. They're not the cause of disease. So targeting the consequence of disease is not going to fix the disease. The root cause of disease is, number one, decreased blood flow to certain regions of the brain. And then you get insulin resistance. In fact, Alzheimer's has been considered diabetes type 3. And what we've published on is nitric oxide potentiates insulin signaling, improves glucose uptake, improves cerebral blood flow. So now you can get the good stuff in, oxygen, nutrients, and take the metabolic waste material out. And so when you do that, there are no tau tangles, there are no beta amyloid plaque, there's no misfolding of protein, because the cell actually does its job. It has the blood supply, it has the glucose, it has the metabolic substrates it needs to perform its function. So it doesn't become dysfunction, you don't get misfolding of protein, and you get to the root cause of the disease.
Right. Have you looked at mouse models? Has there been any studies done on mouse models with Alzheimer's disease? You can possibly, even biopsy them, and they're disposable in a way. You don't in the lab.
Yeah. No, we had not on Alzheimer's. I mean, early in my basic science career, we used a number of different mouse models to kind of elucidate the nitric oxide signaling pathways. But to be honest with you, we don't need to go into mouse models. We have the basic understanding of the root cause of Alzheimer's. And as it relates to nitric oxide deficiency, that we can rationally design safe and effective drugs and go straight into clinical trials into humans with Alzheimer's. We know our drug is safe because we're not giving a synthetic compound that's inhibiting a biochemical reaction. These aren't monoclonal antibodies that are fooling the immune system. What we do is restorative physiology. It's not pharmacology. So when we give the nitric oxide at doses that the body would normally produce, we wouldn't expect any side effects. Now, the challenge for us on the drug development program is trying to decide what's the right dose in the right patient administered at the right time to specifically affect Alzheimer's, improve glucose uptake, improve cerebral blood flow, and overcome the neurological deficits that's associated with Alzheimer's. That's our challenge, and I think we've cracked the code, and I hope to start these drug studies in 2024.
I'm excited, and especially with Alzheimer's disease, and you mentioned it's diabetes type 3. And the mechanism is the same, as you mentioned. It's a lack of blood supply. And Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. And yeah, this sounds fairly interesting. Maybe I'll have a chat with you after this podcast about what you are exactly doing, and maybe we can look at that further. Actually, I did work as an Alzheimer's researcher back in the day. We were testing out a couple of mouse models, so I had a little bit of connection with mouse models and Alzheimer's disease. Yep. And you also mentioned, yes, please.
Yeah, I brought on Dr. David Perlmutter to lead our clinical trials in Alzheimer's. I think he's probably one of the world's experts on vascular dementia and Alzheimer's, specifically as it relates to the metabolic perturbations and the metabolic disease as it relates to Alzheimer's. So Dr. Perlmutter is extremely excited and helping us immensely in getting not only the information out there, but helping design a clinical trial with meaningful endpoints that we can show not only slowing the progression of disease, but hopefully even reversing it.
Great. You mentioned improving the physiology, and you also mentioned wound healing in diabetes individuals.
Yeah.
And we know with diabetics that the problem that they have is that their blood vessels get so tight that you don't have any blood flow there. And when you don't have blood flow, then wounds don't heal properly.
That's right.
And you mentioned that you have topical applications that can potentially heal wounds more quickly. Is that through generation of blood vessels, or how does that work?
Well, it's twofold. So there's been no innovations in wound care for 50 years. And as you know, as a physician, you treat wounds the same way today as you did 50 years ago. It's negative pressure and relieving of the basically removing the pressure on the wound. So what we do, and all non-healing wounds are infected, right? So the problem with non-healing wounds is a recurring infection that becomes antibiotic resistant, and then the ischemia, the hypoxia, the lack of blood flow to the wound to where you can't get, the stem cells and the tissue granulation in there to actually heal that wound. So with our topical nitric oxide, it's antibacterial, so it kills the infection, and it also causes hyperemia. So it diffuses into the wound bed, dilates blood vessels, recruits capillaries, and now you can actually see that wound turn pink, bright red with blood supply. You get tissue granulation, you mobilize stem cells, and the wound heals itself. We've had 4 or 5-year-old non-healing wounds we completely heal in less than 6 months with our topical nitric oxide. These are stage 4 decubitus ulcers. My dad's a paraplegic. He's been in a wheelchair since 1984. I've dealt with decubitus pressure ulcers for most of my adult life, and he had a non-healing wound for 3 years. This was kind of the impetus for me to develop this as a drug, because we completely healed a 3-year-old non-healing osteonecrotic osteomyelitis ischial ulcer on my dad simply by putting nitric oxide into the wound, and it completely healed it.
Interesting, fairly interesting. And this is truly groundbreaking. And diabetes doesn't just kill you, it kills you slowly, and it kills you through these means. And as you mentioned about your dad, yes, it's a very, very slow process, and slow and steadily people lose their limbs, lose their, their bottoms get infected, develop ulcers. I'm excited. Yeah, interesting. And definitely would want to talk to you off this podcast as well, see what other potential avenues we can talk about. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you as a valuable viewer. And if you liked this segment, you can watch all of the different individual segments or the whole podcast to have a broader understanding on this topic. Just check the links in the description or what you see on the screen right now. I'm Dr. Umer Khan. Looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you.